In this video, we're going to cover Katana's feature, Outsourced Purchase Order. But before we get into the details of what exactly is an outsourced purchase order, I want to take a step back and do a general contextual overview of the most common workflows that are found in manufacturing and sales. We've broken them down into 4 examples, and just want to talk about them because as you become a manufacturer who is either operating in a large industry or even you're just a small mom and pop shop, as you grow, your manufacturing operations will become more complex. And all of these specific workflows are handled in Katana's platform to a lesser or higher degree. So let's start off with the first one, manufacturing. In its concept, it is the most simple. Let's say that you buy in your own ingredients, they get shipped to your location, you have your own team, they do their own work, they perform operations combining those ingredients, and then once the work is done, you have something called a product that you sell. That's a manufacturing workflow. You can think of it kind of like a bakery. You buy some eggs, you buy some flour, you buy some yeast, you have them shipped in, you do a mixing process, you stick it in the oven, and then voila, you have bread. And you do it all in-house. Very, very simple process. That's called a manufacturing workflow. Super easy. The next one, probably even easier, is the reseller workflow. This is basically where you buy in a good from somewhere and then you resell it for a profit, but you don't do any operations in between, which is unique to manufacturing. So why is this important? Why are we bringing these up? Well, in many businesses, you don't only just do one type of workflow. It's quite common that you have both of those workflows. And so the different types of workflows that you have in your business also need to be supplemented and supported within your ERP solution. So having combinations of them becomes very important within how you manage your business. The next one is something called partially outsourced manufacturing. Partially outsourced manufacturing is where you take a product, you take some raw ingredients and you perform some operations to them. You do step 1, step 2, step 3. But maybe once the product gets to step 4, you don't have the capability within your manufacturing to do that specific process. So you take that specific item that is what we would call a semi-finished good or partially completed product, and you send it somewhere. And then you have somebody do the service for you for that specific operation. Then they send it back, and then you do step 5, and then you have a finished good. This is what we call partially outsourced manufacturing. Partially outsourced manufacturing is basically where you take one of the processes or a couple of the processes from the whole of processes, and then you send it to some location to have the work performed, and then it comes back to you, and then you finish it. So that's partially outsourced manufacturing. Fully outsourced manufacturing, also called turnkey manufacturing or contract manufacturing, we call it outsourced manufacturing, is the act of having a completely different entity in a completely different location manufacture a product for you, meaning that they do all of the service of operations to make that product for you. But within your supply chain, you probably have a scenario where you might be in control of the inventory of ingredients which you own that go into that contract manufacturing process. So for example, you might buy some materials from a supplier, ship it to some outsourced manufacturing location, they perform the process for you, and then they ship the finished good to you. This is super important for any business that actually has zero manufacturing capability, but still manages the manufacturing process on behalf of somebody else doing it for them, to which they buy those services in. So these are the types of workflows. Outsourced purchase order workflow covers the fully outsourced manufacturing workflow type. And so that's what this entire series is dedicated to when we start getting into the details of how it's used in Katana. I'll give a couple more examples just for more context. Manufacturing use case, one good example of this would be furniture company. Buy the wood, cut the wood, assemble the wood, paint the wood, boom, you have a table or a chair, whatever it is. That's full in-house manufacturing, simple manufacturing workflow where none of those steps are altered or done anywhere else. Reseller workflow, if you're that manufacturing company and you have a showcase retail store, you might display all of your coffee tables or furniture that you make, but you might supplement it with sales of things like vases. So you buy those in from another supplier and then you just resell them. There is no added manufacturing to those particular items. And then partially outsourced manufacturing use case. Here's a really good one. Maybe you manufacture bicycle frames or actually make bicycles, but you have internally the ability to take pieces of metal, cut them, weld them, and then when they're cut and welded together to make a specific bike frame, you have to send them to a specific location that does powder coating because maybe in your business you don't support that. So whenever you send them out for powder coating, the powder coating then gets completed and then they send back this item to you, but you paid them specifically only for the powder coating. But this is not a finished good. It's only a finished good once you assemble all of the additional parts that go into it to make this bicycle, for example. So it's actually basically cut and weld, step 1 and step 2, and then step 3, powder coating, done elsewhere, and then step 4, assembly, final bike, is done as the last step whenever the powder coated frames return to you. But let's say you don't do any manufacturing yourself. And the last example would be the fully outsourced manufacturing use case or workflow, where let's say your business is somebody who sells things like these special chairs, but you don't actually make those, but you do buy the materials for them. So for example, you might buy in the wood that's used because it's a special type of wood, and you might buy in the cloth because it's a special type of cloth. It's quite common that companies that are doing the engineering side of this will use fully outsourced manufacturing as a way to create these products using partners. So then you would just simply create a purchase order for a company to make all of the cloth and the frame for this particular item, and it will come to you as a finished good, but you may be in control of the supply chain for all of the raw materials that are happening at their location as they get consumed before you receive the finished good. This is one example. Another example could be a cosmetic brand. You might have the recipe where you developed like what is it that needs to be in the ingredients, but you don't have manufacturing capability to do that. So you will buy the ingredients from your suppliers. You'll send those ingredients to a place that does the mixing and bottling for you of these particular creams, and then you will then receive them back at your warehouse prior to selling them just by the issue of a purchase order. So that in a nutshell is outsourced manufacturing. And what is it covering for us with respect to Katana? So in the upcoming videos, I'm going to show you how to set this up for your materials and products, as well as give you an overview of how the workflow looks when generating a purchase order using an outsourced purchase order type of document. So the outsourced purchase order document basically is when you, as a manufacturing company who doesn't manufacture yourself, will then go in, buy the services from a contractor using a purchase order, but then tracking the materials that you as the manufacturer own at that manufacturing location as they're consumed in the manufacturing process prior to receiving your finished goods. So that's exactly the use case that this outsourced purchase order specifically covers, and it helps businesses that classify themselves as contract manufacturers. But it also helps businesses who are in the process of not only making things in-house, but also working with contractors too. So this will give you an additional leverage point for your own company if you do both in-house manufacturing, but also use contracted manufacturing as a supplementary way of manufacturing too. Also possible for businesses that are doing engineering, for example, like fashion industry. They design the fashion goods, and then they have to give the contract out to a larger manufacturer to make them for them every time you have, let's say, seasonal clothing. So I hope that you'll find that this video series is useful as well as this feature, and good luck to you, and I hope that you enjoy.